Hello. In this video, we are going to be starting the Blender walkthrough of St. Andrew's Beach House in New Zealand. I'm going to be showing Blender as an architectural tool just because of how powerful it is with lighting and materials, and it's really worth investing time into it and learning how to use it because it pays off very quickly. I want to also let it be known that this is just my approach to using Blender. There's probably 3 ways that you can get one task done. So as long as the final product looks good and it doesn't explode your computer, then it's probably okay. And as I've said in the previous video, Blender is really used for movies and video games, but it can also be used for architecture and is becoming more commonly used for it. Here's some examples of the type of work you can create using Blender once you master it. These are not my own images. So, to get started, we are going to click outside of this box and delete everything inside of our scene using a drag select. Now, I'm going to be importing a FBX from my Revit file, specifically from my Revit video series that I also have on this channel. You can import a variety of different file types. I recommend FBX or OBJs, which are the most common for Blender. When it comes to Revit, FBX is incredibly easy to get out of it, and if you're using something like Rhino or SketchUp, I think OBJ might be easier. But once you have those exported, make sure you're doing it from a 3D view so that it actually has the full model. I'm going to go to File in the top left corner, and I'm going to go down to Import. And since I have an FBX, I'm going to click FBX, but you could hit OBJ up here. But we're going to use FBX. And I'm going to locate the file that I already have exported, and I'm going to click Import. I'm not going to really play with any of the settings right now. And there is our entire model right there as we had it in Revit. Now I'm going to come down to the Scene tab where I'm hovering my mouse, and I'm going to go to Units, the drop-down menu, and make sure that it's set to metric because that's what I modeled my Revit model in. It already is, so I don't have to change anything. If it wasn't, I would probably re-import after changing the units. The very first thing I'm going to do is actually delete my topography because we're going to do our own, which is going to be much higher quality, so I'll delete it, and I'm going to delete the path that I modeled as well. And from here, I'm going to pull this down to reveal the hierarchy, and everything right now is in one big collection. It's all the walls from Revit. You can even see that the names actually have the categories from Revit when we modeled that, which is pretty neat. Now, if we go to the top, we can actually see this 3D view right here. And this is actually the last scene view from when we exported the FBX. This was the 3D view, but I'm going to delete that because we don't actually want that view. I'm going to select the very topmost object, scroll down, and shift click the bottommost one to select everything in between. You can see everything is selected. Then we're going to right click in the middle of the screen, move to collection. We're going to click new collection, and we're going to name it something like building or original design and create. And as you can see, we can fold this folder that we've just created, and everything fits inside. So we can now do extra things in this scene and it won't be messy with the pre-existing design. You can also easily hide the entire design with the visibility. So the first thing I think we should tackle should be the new topography because we're going to be making our own pathway and everything ourselves. So let's go to Add in the top left toolbar. You can see right here. This is where Add is, and I'm going to select Mesh and go to Plane. And you'll see that it gets added at the origin point of the file, which is inside the middle of the house. And we are going to hit S to scale it and pull. And we're going to make this something really large, like the general size of the site. If it were a physical model, something that, shows enough context around your building. And I'm going to scale it on the Y-axis to make it thinner in this direction. And now I need to move it down on the Z-axis to show just a little bit of the concrete footing. That is the start of our topography. So we are going to go to the hierarchy after selecting it, and we're going to double click to rename it topography, just so we can keep track of it once our file gets crazy. So the next step we're going to do is subdividing our big topography plane right now. So what we need to do is switch to edit mode by hitting tab, and we will right click the center of the selected face and hit subdivide. You'll see it changes into 4 separate faces. Now in the bottom left corner, we're going to hit this new subdivide menu. We're going to open that. And from here, we can type a new number of cuts to make it even more subdivide. Let's turn it up something high, try 20. We need even more. Let's try 30. We still need a little bit more, so we'll turn it up even further. I think this is a good base point for our topography, but later on I'll show you how to add even more detail. Now let's go to a different mode. So go up to edit mode on the top left corner and hit the drop down. We're going to select sculpt mode. This is the sculpt viewport, and it's usually best used in the viewport shading where there's no colors at all. The colored version might be a little bit harder to see where you're sculpting. Wireframe can sometimes be useful, but essentially how this works is we're going to be carving and painting the mountains or the surrounding contexts, hills. And once we're in here, the most important part of the toolbar, I think, is this top ribbon right here, where you can increase the radius of your paintbrush. I'm going to show you an example down here. Remember, Control-Z is how you undo things, so please try out different brushes, see what they do. But if you click and drag, it will raise the ground a little bit in the resolution based off the subdivisions that we have from the plane. I'm going to turn off Show Overlay so we can see it a little bit better. As I said, you can click and drag, and I'm going to hold it down, and it raises up the ground. We're a little pixelated right now, so I'm going to show you a way to combat that. If you take the radius and turn the radius up to get a bigger circle, bigger brush, this will already make things a little bit smoother. It looks much nicer. I'm going to undo all of that, and I'm going to show you the strength in the top ribbon. This allows you to control how strong your brush is. So if you turn it down to something low, the ground is barely going up. I'm going to undo that. And if we turn our strength way up, it will make very high hills. I'm going to undo that and turn it back down to something like 0.5. 0.5 is a really nice base point for strength, and the radius is something that's probably going to change around a good amount. So the next thing is all the different type of brushes we have on the bottom, or maybe the left side of the screen, depending on your version of Blender. Some of these brushes are really great for making topography, and some are more made for, video game or movie production like Blender's intended for. But I encourage you to experiment with a bunch of them and see what they do. Just try them out. They're kind of fun to play with. Draw is the really basic one for getting your mountain started. I'll turn the radius up. Clay Thumb is pretty good for making different ground formations depending on your site. Clay Strips is really good for adding just little details or making the ground look rougher. I think it's really good for finishing touches on the ground. I'm going to undo that. Of course, these aren't perfectly measured like a real site, so if you have a Revit model that has actual accurate topography, it's kind of nice to just do these as touch-ups on top of it. Normally when drawing with these, it goes up, but if you hold Control, it will actually dip downwards or carve out instead, which is really great for making dips or lakes, things like that. And it's the opposite of whatever your normal brush does. So now I'm going to use the basic brushes to try to make the topography look like the site as much as possible, just kind of a basic level scale, no details yet. And I'm just going to speed this up. I can tell from images online that there's a sort of hill behind the house and a dip on the other side as the hill goes downwards. Now I'm going to show you what DIN Topo does. I imagine it stands for Dynamic Topology. Up right here in the top right corner of the main ribbon, I'm going to turn it on and hit OK, but I think the warning is going to disable it. I'm going to hit the drop down menu, and you can see there's a detail size with a pixel slider. So essentially what this does is when you go over the topography, it changes the level of detail with the vertexes. So let's use something like clay strips. I'm going to zoom in here and just use it over this little corner just to test it. I'm going to really quickly go to edit mode and turn on the overlay just to show you what the vertexes look like right now. There's not really a whole lot, so we don't have much detail. So I'm going to turn the overlay back off and go back to sculpt mode. And we're going to turn on DIN Topo. You'll see that as I start drawing that the detail level of this new sculpting is much higher than before. It's adding detail. Let's go back to edit mode, turn the overlay on. You can see we have a lot more vertexes in this area now because of the DIN Topo. So be careful with this, because if you do this everywhere, it will add a lot of unnecessary vertexes and make your file size really big, and it might crash your computer. So only use this in places you will see or are really important. I'm going to go back to sculpt mode, turn off the overlay, and I want to show you another little thing, which is crease sharp. This is really good for mountains if you're trying to make erosion patterns on the side of a mountain, maybe in the far background of a render. This just, simulates erosion going down the side of a mountain because of water. There's actually been a couple times in my college architecture classes where we have a site survey that doesn't really seem to capture the erosion that I actually see on site when I do a site visit. So this is kind of an easy, fun way to add those afterwards if you have pictures to reference. I'm going to undo everything we just did, and I'm going to show you clay strips just to show you how this can affect the level of detail of the ground. I'm going to use it with din topo. And I'm just going to cover a couple areas to add some detail to it. For example, this little corner mound of dirt, I'm just going to tap and drag just a couple times. Nothing too crazy. You can see that this is really adding already a nice level of detail that we don't have before. Once you have lighting in this scene, it actually adds so much depth to the scene rather than over there where it's a little bit flat and it looks fake. Once you add textures to this with the lighting, it becomes much more convincing than just a flat topography. Now, before we go and add this detail to everywhere in the file, make sure to hit File in the top left corner and save your file. Because when you're adding all these vertexes, it might crash your computer, which is actually exactly what happened to me while recording this video. My thought process behind where I'm doing this detail is basically just where it's going to be seen in the viewport, and also if there's a transition between light and dark and lighting where I think the trees will cover, I'm making sure to put it there so that the lighting shows off. Once we're done with that, I'm going to go back to edit mode so we can check out our mesh and see how crazy it looks. You can see these different levels of detail, different areas. Over here where we have more dense vertexes are because we were zoomed in while using din topo. And you'll also see other places where we didn't even use it at all, so it looks the same as it was when we started. But yeah, I think it's just a nice little level of detail that you can add. When you render something like this, the lighting combined with the roughness will just make the ground come across as a lot more realistic than without it. It's a subtle little change, but I think it's really important. Now, of course, as I said, this isn't going to necessarily be purely accurate to what your site is unless you actually start with an accurate base behind it. But I think something interesting that you can do, although I'm not going to show it in this video, is that you totally could put this in other programs like Rhino and use some commands to extract the topography lines, and it will actually make you a topography map based off of this. So if you sculpt something that you really like and you think represents the site well, you could actually turn it super easily into a stepped physical model. I think the next best step we should do is texturing the topography, and there's a bunch of different ways you could get textures for this. You could make them yourselves using a photo camera, or you could even find them on the internet. My favorite places to look are Architectures, for example. This is one that I've used a lot throughout my college years. They have a lot of high quality textures for interiors and exteriors of buildings, but not so much when it comes to the actual landscape. There is a search bar and even a category area which can help you narrow down your search because they do have quite a lot. Let's go to the landscaping section just to see what they have. And there's not really a whole bunch for our purposes with our topography, but they do have some options if you need them. Besides that, I also like to use Polyhaven. We're going to return here for some plant models later on in the next video, but they do have textures. They have a lot of great materials for both interior and exterior, and they're also set up for PBR, which is physics-based rendering materials, which we're going to get into in a future video. So I would go ahead and grab some materials that you're looking for off the internet for whatever your scene looks like. So I'll show you how you can add a material to your topography. If you select your topography and go to the material tab on the bottom right corner, as I'm showing, you can actually hit the plus sign on the right side to add a material and hit new. We'll go to edit mode and hit A for all, and we will assign the material. And you could totally just use a base color, but we're going to click on this little yellow dot to open up a menu. And we are going to go to under texture, we're going to hit image texture, and I'm going to hit open, and I'm going to locate the topography texture that I found on the internet. I'm going to use this one. Go to the viewport shading, turn off the overlay, and you'll see that we have a base color right now, which is not what we want to see. So we need to unwrap this. So turn the overlay back on in edit mode. I'm going to go to the UV on the top ribbon, select Smart UV Project. I'll show it again, UV, unwrap, and Smart UV Project. Then we hit unwrap, and you can see that our texture is at least there now, but it's way too big. So we need to fix the scale. We're going to go to the UV editing top tab. And you can see we have two windows. I'm going to drag this line in between to make the left one smaller. If you use the scroll wheel on this top ribbon up here, you can scroll to the side and you'll see the viewport shading again, and we'll turn on the textures just so we can see it in this window. Turn off the overlay. everything in this left view is already selected, so we can actually hit S in this left window specifically, and we are now scaling how the texture is wrapped. You can see as we pull in and out that it will actually change the scale of the texture. I'm going to type numbers for the scale value, and I think an 18 scale value is good for this. It's not perfect, so we're going to size it up by 1.12. We are going to go back to layout and turn off the overlay and scroll down in your material tab and locate roughness. We are going to turn the roughness pretty far up because grass is rough, and with the preview light you can see that this is quite rough looking. If you turn roughness down, you'll see that it makes the material very shiny. We don't want shiny grass, so we want it to be high, but that's how you affect roughness on a material. Now that might be all you need for your render scene, but I'm going to show you the more advanced version of the textures where you can actually paint textures onto the ground, similar to how we sculpted mountains, except we'll be painting different textures onto the ground. So if you go to the shading tab on the top ribbon, this is what we see once we're in the shading tab. I'm going to take this bottom window and expand it by pulling the top edge upwards. It's all we need to see while we're working on this. So these are Blender's nodes. We can take these little points and connect them to do different things to this object, specifically the topography object right now. This is a shading tab, so we're doing things involving materials here. To start, let's delete the principled BSDF. We actually don't need that for this. I'm gonna expand this just a little bit, and you can see we have no texture right now because there's nothing going into the material output at all. First things first, we need to add our image texture by going to texture and then image. Let's drag that over here. And I'm going to duplicate it by hitting Shift and D. I'm going to move my material output over here, and I'm going to stack these up nicely. And this top one, we're going to make it our base texture. So anywhere that we're not painting, it will automatically be this texture. So find a texture that you think should be on 80% of your ground. I already have my texture, so I'm going to select forest ground. Now for the second image texture node, I'm going to put in a texture that I want to be my first one that I can mix in. So this isn't the base texture, but something we're going to paint onto the base texture. So get, a tertiary or secondary topography type texture, maybe like a dirt for a path. Put that in there. And for this last one, it's just going to be another texture that we can mix in because nature scenes are all about layering things and adding variety. So I'm going to have 3 separate topography textures. Now this just shows how to add 3 textures and mix them together, but if you wanted to do more, you could apply the same process. Once we're done with this, we can Shift A to add, and we're going to search for a diffuse BSDF. And we're going to make one of these for each of these textures, so duplicate them, put them in front of them. And this is converting the image texture into an actual shader, which is, in other words, a material. So we're taking the image and turning it into a material through this. So we're going to click this node right here, click and drag into this node right here, into the color node. And we'll do that for all 3 of these. And once you've done that, we are going to go ahead and add some empty image textures. So let's go up here and hit Shift and A to add. And this is another way that you can add things, where you can hit the search bar, and I'm going to type image texture to find it. And we'll drag it up here, place it, and we'll duplicate it to create 2 of them. And once you have 2 of them, we can go and hit new on the top one. And we're going to give it a name. I'm going to call this one map 1. And we're going to double the resolution so that it's higher quality. And we will click new image, drag it a little bit up, and we'll do the same thing here, but we're going to call it map 2. These images are going to contain the data of where we're painting the different textures essentially. Once you have that set up, we're going to go to File in the top left corner of the screen, go down to External Data, and turn on Automatically Pack Resources. This is going to save the maps actually to the Blender file because they're not being saved somewhere like your textures are, which are somewhere on your computer being saved. If you don't do this and you close your Blender file, it's probably not going to save where you painted the textures at all. So make sure to do this. Once you're done with that, we are going to turn on Node Wrangler. So we're going to go to Edit in the top left corner and hit Preferences. Go to the Add-ons section on the left, and we're going to search for Node Wrangler. and click the little box to turn it on. This is a super useful add-on you should probably have on at all times. We can close this out. Node Wrangler actually streamlines adding a bunch of nodes into a single keystroke. So in this case, we're going to select map 1. And now we can hit Control and T to give it a mapping setup. Then it adds it very easily and quickly. So we're going to be taking the texture coordinates from our map and we're going to bring it way down here. And then we're going to disconnect this by hitting Control and dragging and letting go. And we're going to use this vector setup from the map and we're going to use it down here instead. So we're going to select vector right here and we're going to plug it into the vectors of each texture. This is essentially telling it where to unwrap the textures. And on mapping, we're going to turn the scale down here. We're going to change each from 1 to 20 except on the Z-axis, as you can see. This essentially changes the size of the image. But next we're going to add a mix shader and we're going to put them right here. As you can see, there's 2 of them. Now that we've done that, we're going to do a really important part. We're going to zoom in here and we're going to take the output of the mix shader from the top one and we're going to connect that into this first shader node. And we're going to take the output of the next one, putting it here. This mix shader node is mixing these 2 nodes into one output. And we're going to take map 1's color output. We're going to click and drag this node down into the FAC of the mix shader. I'm going to drag this up a little bit. Now, what FAC is essentially the factor between these 2 shaders. So the output of our map here is going to mix the 2 shaders. It's the factor that mixes them. So we're going to be painting color onto this map texture, which is overlaid the entire topography. And one color is going to represent one shader and the other color will represent the other shader. And that's what this is doing, is the factor that's mixing between these 2 shaders, the color. So now we're going to do this exact same setup down here, but we're going to stagger this outwards so that we're mixing this bottom shader, but we're also mixing the output of our other mix shader so that we're just adding another onto it. Then we'll pull the second map's output color down to the factor of the second mix shader. And then lastly, we are going to take the output of our last mix shader and put it into surface. As you can see, we actually do have a texture here now, but we need to unwrap it still. But more or less, this is the base setup to be able to paint textures on your ground. So to fix it, we're going to go back to the layout tab. We're going to select our topography, go to object, and we're going to go to apply, and we're going to select all transforms. Whenever something in Blender doesn't update properly, that's usually something that helps fix it. Once we've done that, we're going to hit tab to go back to edit mode, and we're going to hit A to select all. And we're going to go to UV, and we're going to go to unwrap, and I'm going to use Smart UV Project and unwrap it. Now, if we turn off the overlay, we can actually see our material. There it is. It is unwrapped properly, and it looks as it should. This might look like a bunch of extra steps for the same result as the last method I showed you, but here's the difference. If we go to Texture Paint on the top ribbon, we have our Map 2 opened on the left side view. And if we line up our right side view and also go to Wireframe, you'll notice that it's unwrapped. This is how you can see where it is. It mimics our site. And we'll go back to the textured view, and now we're going to paint the textures. So down here, we have black and white as our only 2 colors right now. We're on map 2 right here. But if you recall, we actually want map 1 because map 2 is our second mixing layer. So we're going to hit this drop down here and we're going to select map 1. This is where the drop down menu is. Now, if you look down in the bottom right corner, we have black and we have white. And everything on the left side screen we can see is black, and we're seeing our base texture that we set up. So if we paint in white, this should mix on map 1 to our second layer. If we paint and click, you can see that it paints the path onto the topography, our second texture. You could paint in the right side viewport if you wanted to. Just make sure to select the correct map on the top of that viewport. It says map 2 right now. But this is the image that's being saved to the blend file. We're going to change it to map 2. You'll see that the white goes away. And we can paint again. You can see our third and final texture is on the ground, and they're all being mixed onto one object. So this is really great for making seamless transitions between different types of surfaces. Now, if you wanted to undo any drawing you did, you can go down here in the bottom right to swap colors. Now that we're drawing in black, you can simply just drag and draw to paint black, which will set it back to the base texture of that map. We'll do this on map 1 as well. And that's really the basics when it comes to painting textures onto your ground surface. I'm going to go ahead and save my file just because it's a smart thing to do every once in a while. Now we're going to place our exterior view. So we're going to go to add, and we're going to go down to camera and add a camera. We're going to turn overlay back on because it's an object that has no actual geometry. It's at our origin point right here. We're going to hit G to move, and I'm going to move it along the X axis and drag it out. And I'm going to move it up on the Z axis. And there's our camera. I'm going to hit this camera icon on the right side of the screen to go into the camera view. This only works because we have one camera in the scene right now. If you have multiple, you have to set it up how you can swap between that, but I'll show you that later. From here, we're going to hit N to open up our transform menu. And we are going to move the camera based off of this. So we can click and drag the slider left to right to move along these different axes. I think it makes it easier when you're inside the camera. We'll zoom in a little bit, and we're going to change the rotation of the camera as well. We're going to use X to move it up and down. I'm going to set this to 0. Actually, that's straight down, so we're going to try 90. Now we're looking forward, so I'm going to set Y to 0, and Z is our side-to-side rotation. I'm going to set this to something that looks at the building. Our perspective makes us look a little bit too close, so we're going to go to the camera tab on the bottom right with the camera selected, to the camera data. And we're going to set the focal length to something a little bit smaller. We're in perspective, so that's good. Try 24, I like how that looks. And now we can move the camera around a bit more and try to frame the building nicely in the entire scene, showing a little bit of context around it. And we're going to center the building here. And I think to make it dramatic, we're also going to change the rotation just to show a little bit more sky. That looks good. From here, we're going to go back to the camera settings, and we're going to go and find viewport display. Open that up and scroll down to pass apart and set it to 1. This blocks out everything outside of the camera, which is just nice visually while you work on it. And to get out of your camera, just simply drag while clicking your middle mouse button like you would to look around the viewport. Now we're going to go ahead and go back to the texture paint tab, and we're going to click the camera in this right view, and it will actually allow us to use the perspective inside of our texture paint menu. So if I wanted to paint on this left side image, I would set that to map 1, but I'm actually going to paint inside of our perspective view right here so that we only paint what we can and need to see. So I'm going to set it back to the shaded view, and I'm going to click to paint, and you'll see that I'm actually using the wrong texture right now. And this is because I haven't set this map to map 1. Now that it's map 1, we are painting our gravel path. I'm going to go out of the camera view just to draw the circular path around our building. You could, of course, have a modeled pathway, but I'm just kind of freehanding this for a more natural, organic pathway. We're going to go back to our camera view to check how it looks. Looking pretty good. There's our pathway leading to the house from outside of the camera. Now, before we move on to the next subject, I think I'm actually going to change the texture. I don't like grass as the primary, so I'm actually going to go back to shading, and I'm going to swap our first texture and our third texture, so the grass texture and the gravel texture. As you can see, we have this more gravelly look. I like this here. It's tiling a little bit, but it's okay because we're going to cover it with grass, trees, and little bushes and things like that. But the last thing I want to show you is how you can change the color of your texture in Blender. You can add a hue saturation node in between the texture and the diffuse, and you can affect the value, saturation, or hue just like Photoshop in Blender. So I'm just going to play around with this until I find something I like. It really gives you a lot of control of the textures in Blender. Quite useful. Following this video is going to be a shorter walkthrough about how you can paint vegetation onto your surface in Blender, and also how you can do some simple grass. So check that out if you're interested, and thanks for watching.